Hello and welcome to a cover story conversation. I have with me Anju Gupta, who just come out with a book, Glocal Terror in South Asia, tracing the roots in geopolitics and the tragedy of Afghanistan. It is a very well-timed book that analyzes the events of the late 70s leading up to the current crisis and predicts potential black swan events. It unpacks a lot of fault lines and also predicts the current situation that is happening in the region. Anju Gupta is a highly decorated IPS officer. She superannuated at the highest rank of the Director General of Police. And in her 34 years of work experience, she has done a stint of law enforcement in Uttar Pradesh as well as in the Cabinet Secretariat of Delhi. As well as in the Cabinet Secretariat in the Government of India. She's also served with the United Nations in Kosovo, Bangkok, and the UN Office of Drugs and Crimes in Delhi. Currently, she's a columnist and an expert on geopolitics and security matters. And of course, congratulations, Anju, on your book. It's really a interesting work and very well timed, I must say, because this is really volatile times that we are living in. So, first of all, if you can just tell us a bit about the book.
Thank you, Priya, for having me on this show. This book is it's a product of 2 years of very deep research, and this research came out of my curiosity is about the factors that really shape the security in our region and the world over. Because what I realized was that the we normally tend to view security through through the lens of bad actors, non-state actors, and their supporters, but never really go deep down into the causes that shape the security environment, creates those actors, and sustain them and sustain the narrative and the
Hmm.
counter narrative. So this book is a deep dive into 46 years of history of our region, basically looking at the geopolitical wranglings that have created security threats, sustain them, deepen the fault lines. So this has been really a very hardcore academic research, if you like. But yes, drawing on huge data which is there in open source, including a lot of declassified cables that the Department of State, U.S. Department of State, and CIA have issued.
In fact, the role of the US is very interesting because you, of course, talk about what happened in Afghanistan, but we are seeing them expanding their disruptive role all over. Now you can see it in West Asia as well. But first, the Afghanistan chapter. You talk about how they moved into Afghanistan in 2001, and 20 years later they moved out. What did they achieve? And what exactly did the US do there? And have they left the region? The havoc they've wreaked on the region is something that you have actually written in your book about.
Yes, so the war on terror, which we know came out of, which was a US response to 9/11, which was definitely the worst terrorist attack in the history of the world. I don't
Hmm.
think there have been any, worse attack than 9/11. So the US started war on terror, and which led to two regime change in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And of course, this war on terror was fought across the world in different forms and shapes. But the war on terror in Afghanistan took a route which I think they could not control, and that is something this book will tell you in detail as to what happened in those 20 years. What are the factors? What are the undetermined circumstances that emerged, which kind of didn't allow the US to withdraw? And
But
yes, please. Yeah.
the fact that US decided to interact, what led to 9/11 is also an interesting, the role of the US going beyond its borders, acting like the big brother, and destabilizing not just the region but the entire world, really.
Uh, well, the I tried to understand as to where did this, the global terrorism come from,
Mhm.
and where did Al Qaeda come from? Because Al Qaeda was the principal actor that actually led to 9/11. I also looked at the strength of Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda's true strength, really, and it was an eye opener to me because by the time the Soviets left the region in 1989, Al Qaeda hardly had a couple of hundred followers there, and their armed cadre was. And this is all Western research. It's not
Okay.
my own research. It's Western research and credible authors. They at that point in time they had about 30 armed cadres. Who were dedicated. So Al Qaeda did not have a global army of, so to say, a global army of fighters that was unleashing a global jihad. So that's
Hmm.
the story which this book tells you, that the narrative was created about a global jihad. What the Afghans fought was a purely local armed resistance. They call it jihad because they are a very religious society, and jihad in Islam actually meant fighting against non Islamic aggressor of an Islamic land, and also against their power brokers who may be Muslims, who may be Islamic, following Islamic faith. So it started there, and we know that when the Soviets entered Afghanistan, it immediately became a proxy war between the two sides. It was an era of Cold War.
Hmm.
And this proxy war era, the 10 years, have created a whole lot of terror groups. It deepened the fault lines within our region and beyond. And this also created the notion of global jihad. So, global jihad is a conceptual notion which was created very cleverly through this period by non-state and state actors, and it has a lot to do with what is happening in the Middle East. So, if you go through the books, you will realize that I have delved on Middle East in
Hmm.
fairly great detail in the initial chapters, so as to tell us what is happening in the Middle East and how it impacted our region. I think that connection is very critical to understand. And today, whatever is happening, Priya, I really shudder to think what will be the impact on South Asia in next 5 years to 10 years on our region.
If I, if I can you elaborate a bit more on, yeah, what you've written about what is happening in West Asia and the Middle East, and how, is it connected to what happened in Southeast Asia?
At that point in time, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, the Arab leaders were also being threatened by the radical, violent, extremist elements, so to say. I wouldn't say they were groups, they were elements.
Hmm.
And we saw the siege of Makkah in 1979 and a whole lot of other events in Egypt, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, and other parts. And these radicals were actually channeled to South Asia to fight a global jihad. There's no concept of a global jihad in Islam. This was given by a fatwa of a Palestinian Jordanian called Abdullah Azam, that we are all familiar with, in 1984. So he just appears there from nowhere, who has no roots in the region, who has no connection to the region, whose mind is in Palestine, struggle for Palestine, but he lands up here and issues a fatwa within 3 years of his arrival in Islamabad on global jihad. And that is how the narrative was changed. That is how thousands of Arabs were, mobilized into a region from Arab world who were, as so to say, were troublemakers there. So, a different tap was created for them. And that Al Qaeda and other groups came out of the radical elements from this pool. But again, the terror groups are never very large in numbers. They are not 10,000 or 20,000 and 100,000. There's always a small number. But then their tactic is different. Terror tactic is different.
Hmm.
That is something that I think Al Qaeda demonstrated, LET has demonstrated, all other groups have demonstrated. So what I'm trying to say is there are unintended consequences of this war on terror that our region has seen even after 9/11. Although in our region, the Cold War proxy war has actually initiated the process. In that sense, the violence showed up much more in the Middle East after 2003, after U.S. invasion of Iraq, while in our region it had started with 1979 proxy war.
So this proxy war, as you said, was between Russia and the US in Afghanistan. What is the proxy war in Iran right now? Is between Israel and Iran?
Well, I think you're trying to trap me, Priya. I'm not.
Trying
I'm
to
not calling
understand.
it. It's too early to comment on this question, but I can tell you an interesting aside. Some of the Westerners are saying that it's a proxy war between China and the U.S., and Iran is a proxy. Over the years, the Chinese have strengthened Iranian capability militarily, economically, technologically, what have you, and now they are Iran is a proxy which is doing the bidding for the Chinese indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly. This is the claim that some of the Western experts are making. I am not taking it seriously right now because of what I know about the Middle East and Iran. I do not think this is I think it's a very simplistic way of saying of commenting on that Iran, China, Russia alignment.
Correct.
The very simplistic way of looking at that. Um, I think I leave it at that at the moment.
But were you surprised, or of course, Donald Trump has clearly underestimated Iran, but the way Iran has attacked US bases in the Middle East, was that something that was expected? Are you surprised, and what is the aim?
Not at all surprised. Not at all surprised. In fact, I wrote a piece, I think 2 days into the war, in one of
Okay.
the papers. And I this is where I argued that this is a huge miscalculation. And they have underestimated Iran's resilience with regard to regime change, with regard to, loss of command and control by, as a virtue of loss of some commanders and their military capability, because I think it was known since last June and maybe prior to that that this war will happen.
Hmm.
And the way the Iranians have responded, you can actually see, Priya, how prepared they were.
Which is true because they had a system in place. It wasn't individuals, it is a
The
system that is
system in
reacting.
place, and I think the entire military strategy was in place. It's in place, and it's not over. And that is why I think we will see much more destruction, because now it is superpower against a nation with a solid military strategy, ready to fight and die. So that is why violence is so great, and that is why the whole world is affected, and it's not over.
But Dubai as a target, because that sends a huge, larger message also.
Yes, so Iran,
Analyze, and what is the future of Dubai really? As it is it over the story?
the story is not over. In fact, I would say, Priya, the I never expected that this is what I will see now, but
Mm.
unexpected has happened. I had expected that US will probably restrain itself and, use proxies and others against Iran, or maybe use Israel against Iran and not get into a direct combat. But
Mm.
it has happened. So geopolitical balance is completely gone today at a global level, at a
Right.
regional level, and it will take, I think, many years for some kind of a geopolitical balance to be restored. And I'm saying it with responsibility. We will see it over the next 5 to 10 years, and I think till then the world will be very transactional. And I think India should be prepared for this kind of a world now.
How do you analyze China's role? I mean, I'm not talking about the proxy war, but so far China has, apart from condemning the attack on Iran, it has not really actively entered the Sinner theater as yet.
China has not entered because China has become a superpower, and one of their strategy has been not to get militarily involved in any theater.
Okay.
If you look at their history, they don't get involved in any theater, but politically, diplomatically, economically, they are there almost everywhere. The Chinese don't get involved, and I think that is what explains their, meteoric rise. And you see, they are at par with the US. Having said that, if you look at the kind of statements that pro Chinese actors, I'm not going to name anybody here, but they are the ones who largely tell you, what is that Chinese are thinking, have made very strong statements in favor of Iran, even to the extent of going that Israel will regret if they use nuclear weapons against Iran. I think that's a very strong statement coming from China. So I militarily they are not involved in combat, but
Hmm.
I think the Chinese are very much there, because it's a global order which is breaking or broken, and Chinese being a superpower that US will probably not engage with militarily. I hope not. I think Chinese are playing their part. I'm not commenting whether this is good or bad or right or wrong. I'm not commenting on the merit, but the
Correct.
Chinese are very much there in the geopolitical wrangling.
So, and will Chinese now see this as an opportunity to turn towards their plans for Taiwan? Is this the time when there is the Ukraine war happening, this happening when US is doing what it wants? What is to stop China from doing what it wants? There is no global rule of law anymore.
I think Chinese are smart people, and I'm saying it's really a compliment. I think they would not like to jeopardize their economic growth, their technological growth, and whatever political standing they have achieved, alliances they have made with Russia, Iran, many other nations, North Korea. I think Chinese if good sense prevail, will not jeopardize that. So I don't see the Taiwan happening anytime soon. I may be wrong completely because I can't get into Xi Jinping's mind. But whatever is my understanding of China, I think they will look at their larger long-term goals and then take some action. They will not give a knee-jerk reaction. That's my understanding of China's moves.
Okay, I'm going to take a break and come back and continue the conversation and try and ask you as to where is this conflict headed? Is there any way it can end? Are there any mediators that you can pinpoint? People are saying maybe the Gulf countries could play a role. Saudi Arabia, for instance, could that be an option? So after a quick break, I'm going to come back to you on that.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to a cover story conversation. I have with me Anju Gupta, the author of Glocal Terror in South Asia. It's a book that traces the roots in geopolitics and the tragedy of Afghanistan. But of course, she has also looked at the fault lines on the entire region and predicted the tumultuous times that we are living in right now. Anju, so congratulations. And before the break, we were talking about what is happening currently between Iran and Israel and the US. And is there any way, how do you see it ending? Who will mediate? I think even Trump wants to get out. He's realized that this is not what he had anticipated. But how does he end this war?
I think it's a $1 trillion question. It's really a $1 trillion question, even if Trump wants to end it today. And my sense is he's restless. At least that is what you can make out from his tweet war, and because he also carries out tweet war on tweet through tweets.
Yeah, on
So
social media.
so I get a sense for last 2 days or so that he's there is restlessness in Washington, and they want to somehow end it. But how do you end it with the notion of victory? How do you manage Israeli aspiration and their goals? It's not that easy, Priya. It's not that easy, and I don't want to say anything more on this topic. I think we are entering a very fragile, difficult phase right now.
So I understand why Israel wants to, act against Iran, but why is Trump? Is it just the powerful Jewish lobby, or does there anything else that he gets out of this?
I think I'll write a book about it as to
Okay.
why US has been, why under this president or even under Biden, how did they handle Iran and why things have come to this situation. So it's a long story, Priya. It's a long story. But at the moment, it appears that, Netanyahu managed to convince him. And he had people around him who also kind of were convinced about it, or they probably didn't want to give a different opinion to the president. We don't know right now, but everything was leading up to it. There are many factors, and as I said, I think it's a subject of a book as to why, about US and Iran relations and why it has come to full fledged war.
Exactly, because Israel did, tell me about the Middle East, how it's positioned, because, the Abraham Accords did bring about some kind of an economic truce between Israel and the other countries, except perhaps, a couple were on the dithering. Uh, are those countries now the ones that can mediate?
Looks very difficult because Abraham Accords have happened now. If you look at the chapters on the Middle East in the book, Egypt and Jordans
Hmm.
were actually the first one. It was not called Abraham Accord, but they were the first one to have restored their diplomatic relations with Israel after a couple of wars, Arab-Israeli wars. And then by and by, Abraham Accord became the focus of this rapprochement, continuing rapprochement, and we saw the UAE doing it, Morocco doing it in some fashion, and there was a talk that Saudi Arabia would also do it. These Some of these countries are so closely aligned, or at least in common perception with Israel, it may be difficult for them to mediate. Uh, we know which countries are mediating right now because Iranians are talking about it. Israelis are not, but Iranians are hinting, and there are many countries which are trying to do that. And it will only happen through one of the GCC countries or maybe two. I don't want to name them because it's a very, as I say, it's a very sensitive time right now. So I like to hold on to my uh, prediction, but definitely they'll come from, looks like GCC.
Hmm.
Other than that, it could be China.
Well, China does seem to have a lot of clout right now, so let's see where that goes.
Why?
But
Yeah.
yeah, also, one quickly, the division in the Arab world between the Gulf, the Arab, the Sunnis versus the Persian Shias, how deep is that left?
No, I don't think it is deep. Right now, it is not deep. That is the prism which was used to view the greater Middle East in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, especially after the Iranian Revolution, in which Ayatollah became the religious and the functional leader of Iran.
Mm.
Uh, I don't think that anybody uses that lens to view the power play in the greater Middle East today. Uh, it doesn't come across
Too
like that.
simple.
It is pure power politics. And power politics also uses different lenses, ideology, so to say.
Hmm.
So Shia Sunni was that ideology, that lens which we saw was being used not just by the people in the Middle East, but also far beyond, because people were looking at Middle East also through their own lenses, chashmas, as you may like to call. I don't think that is the way it is today. For a long time, it has not been like that.
How is it today?
Today, I think it is pure power politics and
And transactional.
fault lines. So there are fault lines within the region. There are fault lines at global level, and there is history, and I think there is power politics. So interplay of all these elements.
And also, there is another conflict happening on our own borders, Pakistan, Afghanistan, what is happening currently. A little bit about that, if you can analyze it for us.
What the Pakistan has been blaming Taliban-led Afghanistan for supporting TTP and the Baluch insurgents on their soil. And as we have seen since the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, August 2021, um, we have seen that number of attacks in Pakistan have gone up, and their casualties are running into hundreds every year of their security personnel. But they like to blame, Taliban for supporting these anti-Pakistan group. Taliban also came under attack by this group called ISKP, Islamic State Khorasan Province, the so-called branch of Daesh, Islamic State in the Greater Khorasan region, our region, so to say. And they blamed Pakistan for unleashing this threat against Afghanistan when Taliban came to power. There were a number of attacks. Senior Taliban leaders were killed. There were attacks across mosques on in public places. It continued for 2.5 years, and then somehow Taliban managed to control that threat. So both sides blame each other for their security problems. And but let's not forget there is a lot of history between the two sides, and this book actually tells you that history, what has happened over the last 46 years in this region. So
Mhm.
when there is history, people might come together in a transactional mode, so to say, right? Let's become friends. But that history is there. The fault lines are there. So,
And
uh,
let's not forget Osama was hiding in Pakistan. So
so that's what I'm saying. It's far more complex, far more complex, and that is why I think just looking at South Asia through the prism of Pakistan nurturing proxies, India Pakistan problems, I think is not the complete picture. And that is why in this book I try to look at the complete picture. What has happened? Who are the other actors? Right? What was their interest? And how is it continuing? So I think I'm sure if you look at that, you'll probably see different phases of Taliban and different phases of Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I just want to clarify, Priya, when we say Pakistan, we mean this security establishment of Pakistan. We don't mean Pakistan as a nation or people. I'm sure all of us understand that distinction in Pakistan.
no, that is very well put. But lastly, India's place in the region, in terms of we've had a lot of relationships going sour in the last, in the last decade or so, whether it was Nepal, whether it is Pakistan, of course, has never been really stable. There is Afghanistan, there is what is happening in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Why is that?
Well, we have restored a diplomatic relationship with Taliban-led
Bangladesh.
Afghanistan. Their foreign minister visited us, and I think that's a very good move. Very good move. And I am nobody to comment on the foreign relations, but what I can say is, if you look at the current status, I think we have good relations with most of the nations. Pakistan, of course, has always been an exception. I don't know how long that will continue. But I think in foreign relations there will be ups and downs. But it is not my brief or my expertise to comment on foreign policy. I leave
Well,
it
you
at that.
did say there are a lot of external factors. So we have China, we have the US, we have a lot of people interfering in the region also.
Yes.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much, Anju, for this conversation and wish you all the best for the book and hopefully some more conversations on geopolitics and strategic affairs, the world being what it is. But for now, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on the show.
For more such videos, subscribe to the Newsx YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.